But the moment you mention it, 6 months or a year down the line, they'll say, no, I said at the beginning, I didn't want anything serious. So it's like a little disclaimer. It's like a little asterisk on the back of the paperwork in very small writing. I'm not looking for something serious. So the moment someone says that to you, take it very seriously. In this episode, get ready for love.
So, Gillian, how do we prepare ourselves for falling in love?
So many people have huge lives outside of having found the right person. So good careers, they've got interesting hobbies, hopefully some nice friends. And it is important to spend a little bit of time creating space where there is an allowance for someone to come in to your life. And it's not that you have to make yourself smaller or reduce yourself in any way, but you need to have an environment where there is room for another human being. A lot of people who are very busy think, I'm not sure I could possibly ever make the room for someone else. Some of it's physical, some of it's mental. If you think about your space, I remember a good friend of mine many, many years ago saying that when she was ready to find love, what she did was she went into her closet, she emptied half of it out, leaving all of these empty hangers in the closet, making a physical space in her home for the person that she wanted to be there. And it did work. She found a fabulous man and she's still with him to this day. And that was a long, 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 long time ago that I remember being told that story way in advance of becoming a matchmaker. And I loved that idea of creating a space so that someone can come in and enter. So creating a space is maybe about creating some room in your closet, but it's also about mentally preparing yourself, giving yourself the time that someone can enter in. What were you going to ask me? I can tell you're going to ask me something about that.
Well, I was thinking of that lovely line. Do you ever watch Catastrophe? It's just brilliant. And he makes the point when they've been sleeping together that, she's very willing to have him in her bed, but not so willing for him to leave a pair of trousers or a pair of socks. And so I think in a way, sort of almost kind of thinking about making space physically in your closet is actually quite a good thing to do, because at some point you are going to the idea is that you want to meet somebody and you want to bring them into your life, and that might mean having an extra pair of pants and socks and shoes and all that kind of stuff around,
or the toothbrush. Are you mentally ready for another toothbrush on the side of your sink in your bathroom? Some people aren't, and sometimes that's a little bit of a shock. And if you've got kids, if you've got children, are you mentally prepared for someone else being in their lives too? And do you know what the parameters are? Do you know how long it will be before you will introduce your children to them? If you've got younger children, how would you feel if they disciplined your child or gave them gifts? Or there's a number of things you have to think through before you even start tackling the getting out there and getting the right person bit.
So let's start with at the beginning then. What about photographs and pictures?
So absolutely right. Even before you get out there and start the whole process, you need to get a few things in place first of all. Look at what you've got photograph-wise. Do you have something the last 3 months that you think represents you pretty well? And again, we're not looking for the best possible version of you. It has to be a little bit realistic. You don't want people meeting you and being disappointed because they'll never see you again. So think, do you have photographs? Have a careful look through. A lot of people don't have good photographs of themselves. Get a professional photograph taken and think about what you want to write in your bio. You want to take a number of steps at the very, very beginning before you launch off, because you want to get on these apps and get it right at the beginning, which we also talked about. How to deal with apps is a whole other episode that we've done. But you want to make sure that you've got a few steps of preparation, clear headshot, full body shots, not in big groups. Get those photographs done by a professional. There's lots and lots of photographers out there now take photographs just for dating. and they put you in a nice light. They manage to make sure your lighting is good, but also the outfit that you choose shows your body in the most flattering of lights as well.
Um, and what about is there a kind of an attachment style? Are there kind of different ways that people present themselves? Do you have to think carefully about how you want to be perceived by somebody?
So attachment theory is looking at really what happened when you were a child. This is where it all stems from. And as a result of the relationship that you had with your parents or parent or caregiver, that dictates what your attachment style is going to be. And there is a brilliant book called Attached by Amir Levine. And I would recommend that book for anyone who wants to learn more about attachment styles. But broadly speaking, people are split up into anxious, avoidant, combinations of both, and secure. And ideally, you're looking for someone who has a secure attachment style. I'm sure a lot of people listening will have met people or themselves recognize themselves as being an insecure attachment or anxious attachment type. And that's really where you're dating someone, you think it's all going very well, but suddenly they disappear, then they come back again, then they disappear, then they can go. Some of that can be stemming from an anxious attachment style, which is basically the more that you love them, the more that they run away. And even though they couldn't quite explain it themselves, because they like you and they want to be with you, it's very hard to fix. So, but I would recommend people read that book or read more into attachment style to learn what they are. There is quite a bit of evidence that you can work very hard to alter your attachment style. It's not necessarily fixed, but a lot of it is quite ingrained really with the relationship that we had with our parents or our primary caregivers as children.
I also think that you're scared. Mostly, I think people can be nervous about embarking on a new relationship because you don't want it to go wrong, and there are so many pitfalls. So you have to have you need to be in a confident frame of mind.
There's no doubt about that. You're absolutely right, Carol. You need to approach dating feeling as though something good is going to happen. And quite often I say to my clients or people that I'm coaching, don't say, I am single, I am single, I am single all the time, because, the subconscious mind hears that and says, well, that's what I am. Say, I'm searching, I'm finding someone, I'm going to find the right person for me, I'm open to love. Say the things that keep your subconscious mind thinking, oh yeah, this sounds good. Okay, right. I'm searching, I'm looking, I'm finding. That's the way to approach it. If you're continually thinking, I am single, that's how you will remain. You have to get the subconscious brain working with you in your search for a partner.
And would you suggest that if it's helpful to talk to a therapist or a counselor, or find somebody to talk to in order to help you get into the right frame of mind if you're being very negative, if you're struggling?
Yeah, if you're struggling, absolutely. Getting the help of a therapist is always a positive thing. And if you are struggling with maybe not feeling worthy of a relationship or not thinking that you deserve to fall in love or that you deserve to find someone, or you've had years and years and years where you said, I just don't want someone, but maybe you think there's a part of you that does, of course, help from a therapist. But you don't need to be 10 years into therapy to start looking for a partner. If you need to see a therapist because you know that there's something niggling, there's something that just doesn't sit right or makes you feel uncomfortable, or you've got a fear of intimacy, a very common one is a fear of intimacy, then absolutely seek out the help of a therapist who can help you get over that hurdle. But you don't need to have been to a therapist for many, many years before you can then start searching for love. But sometimes a conversation with a friend can also be just as useful as sitting down with a therapist. But by all means, I would encourage anyone who thinks that they need some support in that area to go and find it, to go and get it.
I remember being on a break, sort of wellness break in Thailand, and one evening we had this very interesting speaker who came to talk about relationships. And one of the things that really resonated with me was when he talked about a relationship where you're with somebody that has an older child, and they have never, whether it's a father-son or mother-daughter, and they've always had a very, very, very close relationship. And he was saying that you have to, that person has to be prepared to allow space within that bond for you to be able to get in the middle and love them. And that kind of really struck a chord with me with, friends who had, struggled with in relationships when there were other children. I mean, I know it's incredibly difficult when you're dealing with somebody that has children, or you have children of your own, because inevitably they are your first priority, and they should be your first priority. But it's even more difficult when you're looking to fall in love with somebody, because you also don't want to alienate your children, but equally you've got to allow space.
That's exactly right. And it is such a delicate balance, especially if you're a single parent and you've spent many years as a single parent. You are the two of you, or the three of you, or the four of you. And so therefore to create space to allow someone to come in also involves you having some conversations with your children. And you're absolutely right when you say you don't want to alienate the child either. You don't want the child to feel as though they're any less loved because you've met someone. It is important to bring the children into the conversation. I wouldn't, if the children are very, very young, I wouldn't say anything other than, oh, it's a friend. So if they meet them, it's a friend of mummy's or a friend of daddy's. I wouldn't be introducing every person you ever went on a date with as your boyfriend or girlfriend, or that's going. I would leave that a little bit further down the line. And the interesting thing is, younger children, they don't, they know that mummy sometimes sees auntie so and so or uncle so and so, and then doesn't see them again. And for children, it's not really a big deal. There's not the drama that we might think there is. The children very rarely say, "Oh, why has Uncle David or Auntie Samantha not been round recently?" They moved on to other things. But again, how long you take to introduce your children, I would say leave the children out of the equation for a little while. A little while is healthy for all parties, really.
Tell me about, I hear this being spoken about, your love language. Explain what love language is.
So it is believed, and Gary Chapman's done a really good book on this called The 5 Love Languages. There are other really good books on love languages out there as well. But Gary's the one that came up with this idea that we have 5 love languages. And I'll tell you a little bit about all of them after I've told you what they are. There's words of affirmation. There's acts of service. There are gifts, quality time, and physical touch. And the first one, words of affirmation. So the idea behind all of them is that these are the things that if your partner gives them to you, if the person that you're with, whether you're married, long-term relationship, dating, if they're able to give you the love language that really gets to your heart, gets to your soul, then it's really going to help you both have a happy, rewarding relationship. So if we start with the first one, words of affirmation, what that is someone who really likes to hear that they've done well or are doing well. So words of affirmation would be, gosh, honey, I love that you've made a wonderful dinner. That's a really incredible dinner. You've made something that's absolutely delicious. I'm really enjoying it. Or, and again, it's simple things. It could be, you've mowed the lawn. I love, what a great job you've done of the lawn. It looks fantastic. Just the words of affirmation confirming that, and it could also be, I find you very attractive, or my goodness, you're looking good in that outfit. Any words that kind of reassure, encourage, positive feedback. I love how you've done your hair today. Anything that lets them feel that the contribution that they're making is a positive one. But it's kind of the words that make them, and you'll know from your partner which words it is, whether they want to be your hero, whatever the words are that makes them feel loved. Then we've got acts of service. And this is for people.
I'll break here this one.
You feel like, okay. So acts of service is where people feel loved when other people give them acts of service. So that would mean if you're sitting on the sofa and you're watching a film together and they suddenly appear with your favorite cracker, with the favorite topping or the cheese or the pickle, and they hand it to you, you think, oh my goodness, look at this. They've done this thing for me. And so acts of service could be they put up a bookshelf for you. It could be it's doing something for you to show that they love you. And by them doing that act, by them taking your car and filling it up with petrol, by them taking your shoes that need to be resoled to the cobbler, by doing something for you, and it can be a small act, a big act, as I say, it could be bringing a cracker or, getting your car with more. These acts are considered acts of service. And when people whose primary love language is acts of service receive that, that is when they feel loved by the other person. The next one is gifts. And gifts, this is often misconstrued because people say, oh, well, gifts, does that mean, I got a Birkin. I need a Birkin. That's the gift. Or I need a car. That's the gift. Or a house. That's the gift. Now, gifts for people who feel loved by gifts, if that's their primary love language, it could be, and you've mentioned this before, it could be the flower out of someone's garden. It doesn't have to have cost any money at all, but they feel loved when they receive a gift from their partner. And with all of these love languages, and we've got a couple more to go through, but just while I'm thinking about this, with all of these love languages, if you're saying, well, how do I know what someone's love language is? Usually, the love language that someone has is the one that they display to other people. So if you're writing this one down. So if someone's love language is gifts, they're often gift givers. They're often giving gifts to other people because that's how they express that they love someone. The next two,
that means that they're going to that they are open to receiving gifts. So the clues are there. You just have to be aware of them.
The clues are there, and you will have received gifts from them. The next two, quality time, and this is someone feels loved when the other person spends time with them. And by quality time, we're talking about phones down, usually television off, although there's some really good examples where quality time for that person meant sitting watching television together, which sounds very bizarre to me. But quality time is the idea of spending time together. There's no other distractions, no other people are there. It's just the two of you spending time. You could still be in an art gallery, you could still be in a museum, but it's the two of you exclusively spending that time together. And the very last one is physical touch. And much like gifts, this one gets misconstrued. Physical touch is not about sex. Physical touch is about when you are cooking and the other person wraps their arms around you, or when you're passing in the corridor and one of you touches the other one's hip, even though you didn't need to. Or when you're out and the person goes to hold your hand, or if they're sitting in front of you and you stroke the back of their head or stroke their shoulder or give them that little nudge. Physical touch is physical touch, but outside of the bedroom. So that's the fifth. What were you going to ask me? I can see you're going to ask me a little question about one of those or thought about one of them.
It was just really that, that those are the 5 languages, and you don't need to sort of try and cover all of them. You just need to be aware that there will be one that will be bubbling stronger than the others.
Exactly. There usually is a primary love language and a secondary love language. But to some extent, people do enjoy all of these. But there is one that's motivating. And the reason this was quite revelatory to view it this way is because there were people who were very unhappily married, and there wasn't ostensibly a reason why. There wasn't some big overarching. No one had cheated. Nothing had happened with financial mismanagement, but they were unhappily married, and it was discovered that the reason was they weren't able to or weren't willing to or hadn't realized that they were not loving the person the way they wanted to be loved. And I hear about this anecdotally when someone says, I was married for, I did so much for her. I was always fixing things, organizing things, sorting things. So they were doing their love language, which was acts of service, and they were spending all of their time loving and loving and loving the way that they loved. But their partner was just not receptive to it because their partner had a completely different love language. And so this person was saying, but I'm loving them and I'm loving them and I'm loving them. And their partner was saying, they just don't love me at all. I'm just not getting any signs that this person is loving me, because their love languages were two completely different love languages.
And that's so true. You can be with somebody for a long time and feel very alienated, and maybe that's important to look at what it is that maybe that you need, and to give them a hint. It's or looking at how they are acting with other people, and then maybe changing your behavior. Because it's very easy to blame somebody else when a relationship is not going well, without kind of looking at maybe how you're behaving or how you have changed or what you can do to make things better.
Right. And it's a great, I would not suggest that people ask on a first date, but if you're just starting to date someone, your third, fourth, fifth date in, I think to say, what is your love language? Do you know what your love language is? Or to say, I've noticed in our dates, I think this is your love language, and ask them, so, and for a lot of people, they might not know what the 5 love languages are. So that in itself is a whole other topic that you can discuss and talk about on a date. But as you said earlier, quite often there are the hints. Quite often you can see there's something that might indicate what someone's love language is. And why not find out the other person's love language and your own? It can make the relationship so much more fulfilling.
I often think, a compliment, it doesn't matter as long as it's sincere, and you don't ask, does my bum look big in this? Because there's only one answer to that, let me tell you, and it's no, darling, it looks wonderful.
Sure. There's no way out of that. As I think most men would know. Although I would say I live in the Netherlands. I think you know that. And the Dutch culture is to be far more direct. So I would recommend that you probably don't ask a Dutch man if your bum looks big in it, because you would get a very honest answer.
But it's true that even the most confident and people that you think wouldn't necessarily need their sort of self-esteem boosting or anything. It's so true that if just a little kind of, oh, that was really good, or you look really handsome today, or whatever. It is quite, I think it can be quite much more meaningful than you think sometimes. Have more impact. I think have more impact.
Well, certainly one of the things that taught me that, I was a headhunter for many years, and I was dealing at the C-suite level. And it was really surprising to me the amount of hand-holding, the amount of reassurance, the amount of coddling that I had to do for executives who were earning millions and millions of pounds a year. And it doesn't really matter what level or what position you've got to or how much you've achieved. If your love language is that you need, want, desire words of affirmation, that's your love language. And it doesn't take away from the fact that you're a huge success. It doesn't take away from the fact that you might even be internationally recognized for what you do, and that everyone knows that you've achieved this thing. When your love language is primarily words of affirmation, you're still going to really enjoy your partner saying that. And in some ways, for people who do have words of affirmation as their love language, they possibly would choose to strive in their career, to perhaps become a celebrity, to perhaps become top in their field of whatever that field of excellence is. Because if that is your love language and people around you are continually saying, you know, can you imagine being David Beckham when he goes out, continually saying, you're a legend, how incredibly well you've done, you know, you're such a, you know, so all of this continual feedback, which also makes it very hard if you have a bad day on the football pitch or if you get turned down for that film, because it really is striking at the heart of how you feel loved. And so you're being totally denied of that love when you get a setback.
You're now asking me to feel sorry for Posh Spice. You married to David Beckham. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry for her. She's a lucky woman, and he's a very lucky man.
They're an incredible couple, and they're in many ways a poster child for a brilliant relationship and a brilliant couple. They've been through a huge amount together. We're getting a little bit of segue here talking about the Beckhams, but she started off as the big star. He really wasn't. His star soared, and they're a powerhouse couple. They've done incredibly well.
So how else, Gillian? What else is there about being ready for love?
So we've gone through making space, finding out your attachment style, thinking about your love language. We've got photographs taken. We've got a little bio that we've written up, thinking of some interesting things you'd love to share. We know that we're not going to be telling our kids, but also we want to be starting to tell people. And so by telling people, again, we're putting it out there, the subconscious mind is getting engaged, but also hopefully we're going to be telling people to introduce us to their friends, to their relatives, to their vet, to their tennis coach. We're going to start getting out there the sense that we want to be, I'm ready to find love. I'm in a great position. This is what's going for me. This is why this is a great timing. And that's when we start asking the who do you know question. So it's about telling people, which is partly to get your whole self engaged in this process, and also partly so that you can start getting some introductions coming through.
And what about if you're sort of introduced to if a girlfriend says, "Oh, I've got this lovely man, he's 5'10" or 6'4," and immediately you sort of say, "Oh no, that's not going to suit me," or how do you kind of guard against that kind of needing that tick box of everything right before you're prepared to see them?
This is the perfect question. And one of the reasons that people fail in their search for love is because of these lists. The lists of criteria, things, requirements, desires, wants. This is the stuff that is really unimportant. And of course, everyone sitting there with their huge list will say, no, it's vitally important. It's not vitally important. What's vitally important is how the other person makes you feel. The more that is on your list, the less likely you are to find love. By the time you say, let's say we look at London and you say, okay, so I'm a female, I want to meet a man. Okay, so now we're talking about 50% of the population. Okay. Then you say, and I want them to be within 2 years of my age. Okay, that's suddenly narrowed it down. We're now talking about 5%, let's say, of the male population. Then you've got to say they've got to be single too. Okay, that narrows us down. They've got to have a degree. Okay, that's even further. They've got to earn over 100 grand. Okay. And so by the time you've got some simple criteria, which is I'd like a man who is single within 2 years, who's degree educated, who earns over 100,000, who's over 6 foot. We're talking about 0.000 something of the population by the time we get there. And these are really simple things that we've asked for. And so it is far more important to think about the values that you have, the values that you're looking for, and to meet someone on that basis. The list of criteria around, let's drop education straight away. Let's drop religion straight away. I really am not too interested in politics either. So you've got to think all of these extra stuff. And if you are a 5'2" girly, I don't want to hear that you won't date below 6'2". You've got to leave some of the tall guys with the tall ladies out there. When we're introducing, I'm looking at your height or taller. That's what I'm looking at if you're a female. And yeah, as I've said before, height is no predictor of success in a relationship.
But also, you don't really, if you're looking for love, you don't really know what you want until you find it. And that's the joy of dating, isn't it? It's being surprised, being pleasantly surprised by people. And, when somebody makes you laugh and you're not expecting it, or somebody pays you a compliment and you're not expecting it, or you find that you have something in common, or you find that you have nothing in common. And actually, you get on very well just because he's such a fascinating, interesting person.
Right. Allowing for happenstance and allowing yourself to take a risk. Take a risk on the type of person. You don't have to have this, you don't have to want to do the same things all the time. It's far more interesting for you to meet someone who has a completely different perspective on life, who has a completely different way of viewing the world, who does different things, who goes to different places. So often when a client comes to my office and I ask them to describe the person that they'd like to meet, and they go into a huge amount of detail and they give me chapter and verse in what they want to meet and what they're going to be like and what they're going to do and where they're going to go. And at the very end of it, the most common thing that I say to them is, are you aware that you've just described yourself? And who wants to date themselves? I think virtually no one wants to date someone who is identical to them. How boring would that be if you had two people who were identical? What you actually want is someone a bit different, someone who complements you, of course, and you complement them. But isn't it far more interesting to date someone who's a bit different to you? What do you think?
Oh gosh, absolutely, 100%. What about location? How important is it that you live relatively close to each other?
This one is quite an important one. This one's quite an important one because all of the studies and all of the research seems to suggest that the person that you are most likely to end up with is not going to be living too far from where you're based. This is what all the stats seem to show us. That does not mean to say that long distance relationships don't work. They do, but there's a proviso. Long distance relationships only ever work when you have an agreed timeline of when it's no longer going to be a long distance relationship. So you both know, okay, I am doing my MBA here, you are working here. That means that every 2 weeks, one of us is going to be flying, or one of us is going to be taking the long distance train. But in 2 years, 3 years, 1.5 years, 4 years, that's going to change because this is where we're moving to together. This is how we're going to get there. This is what we're going to do. But the long distance relationship with no end, with no discussion around when that's going to change, that's not a long distance relationship that's going to survive the course, because you can't have a never ending situation. And I always remember my aunt saying to me when I was a lot younger, never have a relationship with someone that you can't get to in 2 hours by car. And I think it's the sense of, something goes wrong with one of you, you can jump in the car and get there. But you need to have a deadline. You need to have a time frame when this is going to be the two of you together. And you don't have to be the two of you together under one roof, but the two of you together at least in the same city.
So talking of relationships that sort of go on and on for years without ever getting to getting a ring on your finger or something, is it where do you get to? And I know it doesn't necessarily have to be the man that traditionally asks the woman to marry them, but if there are situations where the woman seems to me, the woman may be waiting for him to pop the question and it's not happening. Are there things that you can do to if you really want it to work? I mean, it's such an awkward situation.
But this is also a really good one. So in the matchmaking world, we call these people time thieves. And the reason we call them time thieves, if you are with someone and you have told them at the beginning, and I would recommend that you do say this, not necessarily the first date, although some of my matchmaking colleagues disagree. I would say second or third date in, I would say, in the future, I'm right. Let's rephrase this. So on the second or third date, I would be saying, I'm looking for a long-term relationship that I would like to eventually turn into marriage and having kids.
Wow. Putting it on the table right away, Gillian.
I would put it on the table.
You see, I would be terrified in case they ran a mile.
But I would be saying, but that's if it's the right relationship. So if I meet the right person and I think this is the right relationship and they're the right one for me, this is what I would want to happen in the future. Because there are some people who are just not prepared for that at all, for whom they know that they do not want to get married, or they certainly would never consider it with this person, or whatever the thing is. And you will know at the very beginning, because in the very first date or very second date, usually if someone doesn't want a long-term relationship, they don't want marriage, they tell you. They say, I'm not looking for anything serious. And then what happens is they then behave in the opposite way. So you then think, well, obviously they do want something serious. But the moment you mention it, 6 months or a year down the line, they'll say, no, I said at the beginning, I didn't want anything serious. So it's like a little disclaimer. It's like a little asterisk on the back of the paperwork in very small writing. I'm not looking for something serious. So the moment someone says that to you, take it very seriously. But in the scenario that you discussed, which is where they've been dating 5 or 10 years, you have to say, you know, I've always wanted to get married. I've always wanted to have children. And I need to find out when that's going to happen. Because if that is your intention, then you shouldn't be dating for 5 years. You shouldn't be dating for 10 years. A year is long enough to know, having gone through the seasons. Some people say go through the seasons twice. Some people say go through the seasons once. I'm a go through the seasons once kind of person. But once you've done that, there needs to then be a commitment if that is what you're looking for. And if you're 5 or 10 years down the line, I think it's unlikely.
It's interesting, though, because statistically, we are now getting married later. It used to be sort of 24. I think it's now the average age is 34. And that kind of puts an interesting mark on it as well, because you have much more life experience at 34. You have, in a way, I mean, I got married at 24 for the first time. And I got married for love, and I got married expecting it to be for the rest of my life. And, unfortunately it wasn't. But, these things happen. But I think, I was a very different person at 24 than I was at 34.
Right.
Would I have married the same man in the same circumstances 10 years older? It's kind of, it's like the sliding doors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where is my life? How is my life going to go? And then you meet people who say they've had multiple people asking them, wanting to marry them, which I think is kind of so wonderful on the one hand, to be, to have lots of people wanting to marry, but equally it's such a, I think I would be finding myself thinking, oh, cracky, I turned him down and now I'm with him, and it's not like kind of going up well. And it's all so tricky.
It is also tricky. But what's important to remember is when you do turn someone down for marriage and you later think, oh gosh, I regret that, it's only because we're looking back on it and thinking it would have turned out well. So this situation I'm in right now didn't turn out well. If only I'd gone back, it would. And that's the thing about life. We have no grasp of how it could have turned out. We have no idea what could have happened. And so it's kind of a false history to look back and say, if only I'd done that, it would have been good. Because we actually have no idea how much worse it might have been if we picked that path. So it's much, and I think I like to view it that way, because when you view it that way, you then don't have the regret for the past. You don't view it as, if only I'd done that, it would have been wonderful. Because it could have been terrible. So by viewing it that way, it lets us say, well, I did the right thing at the time. At the time, I turned down the guy for marriage that I should have turned down for marriage.
Yeah, rose-colored spectacles. Always a problem. So I wanted to ask you about when you're on your dating journey, and I'm kind of thinking of Bridget Jones in this one, because dear old Bridget goes, says yes to all these things that she, to go skiing or whatever, which she's wildly inexperienced at. If you are asked to go and share in an activity that you're really not comfortable with, camping, I mean, hands up, I do not want to go camping. I'm sorry, it's just not me. There wouldn't be enough wet wipes on the earth to keep me happy camping. I'll just, should you be open to experiences? Should you go along with it? How much? When is it okay to say, actually, do you know what? I'm not into camping, or
it's always really important that I'm still laughing here at the story though by the wet wipes. It's always really important to know that you can always say no. But there is something really, and that's vital, know your boundaries. But there's also something really transformative about finding the right person. And when you have found someone, and the right person is the right person for you, but when you've found that person who just cannot cope if they're not, out there in a tent with torrential rain, thinking, isn't this great, with a little camping stove, which I agree, couldn't imagine anything worse. But there is something transformative about falling in love with someone like that suddenly you find yourself, buying, hiking boots and a really warm sleeping bag and Googling the best ways to keep your feet warm at night. I think there is something about falling in love with someone like that means that you might do it. But actually, what's more important is that you encourage them in their pursuit of doing that. And as you say, we're often getting married later, meeting the right person later. Chances are they already have a set group of people that they do their phenomenal camping with. And it means that you get, one weekend out of 4 to go and do your own thing with your own friends, not having dropped them. So I think, if they really, really wanted you to try it once, I think, being in love with them, you probably might, but they probably have a circle of friends they're hiking with and taking dehydrated food with and all that kind of nonsense. That's not fair.
Yeah. But you also, you do want to meet somebody. I think one of the markers for me is somebody who does have a good circle of friends. They don't have to have a lot of friends, but a meaningful friends, because I think that shows a good character. If you've had friends for a long time, I think that's rather nice. I would be very wary of somebody that didn't have some good friends.
Well, what's really interesting is that the number of men in particular who have close friends is actually dropping all the time. And the latest figures in the US were 1 in 7 men have no close friends at all.
Wow.
And some of this came out of the pandemic, but most of this is perhaps to do with society, the way that we socialize, that it might be seen as less socially acceptable for men to do certain types of socializing. But it actually is pretty common for men to either have no close friends or just one close friend. And I would caution against not picking a man purely on the basis of him not having a strong social circle. It doesn't mean that a man is an incel just because he doesn't have close friends. I think in many ways it's harder. A lot of things that we can do as women on our own could be trickier for men to do on their own. And it's easier to strike up a conversation with someone. I mean, I've been striking up conversations in the loos of bars and restaurants since I was legally allowed to go to them. That's not something a guy would do. And so it can be quite often easier for women to build those networks and maintain those networks. And it can be trickier for men. Some of the guys I know, their only close friends are men that they met at university. Now, if you didn't go to university and you didn't have that opportunity, you might not have that circle of friends. They don't know anyone outside of that, and that was, 25, 30 years on.
As usual, Gillian, you've put me in my place. Thank you so much. I am learning so much. And I think the lesson from today is keeping an open mind. Keeping an open mind and being positive about in yourself, and also just in the idea that you are able to fall in love. You are lovable, and there's somebody out there for you.
You are completely lovable. The partners out there is myriads. There are millions of possible right people for you, but you will never find them if you don't get out the house and start looking.
And put your lipstick on.
Thanks,
Gillian. Fantastic to talk to you as always.
And you, Carol.